2021. And what we at Raksha are doing is presenting a series of women's authors and just a chat with them to see how and why the books are relevant to Raksha's cause as well. For today, our author is Anju Gattani, who has written a series of books, and the first one is Duty and Desire. It's a great book. I recommend reading it. We'll be sending links to that as we proceed in the chat as well. It's on the Amazon bestsellers list. The reason we're discussing this with Raksha today is, as you will see in the chat and my conversation with Anju, why we're doing this. Raksha is a nonprofit based in Georgia that supports women and men in domestic violence categories, as they call us. Gauri, do you mind showing me some of the banners? Yes, thank you. Before I introduce and get into the chat a little bit, I wanted to tell you about why we are doing. Raksha supports a healthier South Asian community through confidential support services, education, and advocacy. Anju, the next one, Gauri, thank you. We work towards healing, empowerment, and justice for survivors of violence. As you can see, Anju is here with us, and she's an international writer because the book has been going into a lot of different countries, and a lot of different cultures are reading this. People from different cultures are reading this. Anju's website is here, and a lot of her links will be posting to the book. Gauri, the next one, please. Yes. The views and opinions expressed by authors in the series do not represent or reflect the opinions and beliefs of Raksha or our sponsors, funders, and affiliate. I just wanted to make sure everyone understands that. In case this is a trigger warning, this conversation may include mentions or descriptions of harsh treatment experienced by characters, sexual assault, abusive tactics, relationship violence, or depression. In case this content might be disturbing to some viewers, so we encourage everyone to prepare themselves emotionally before proceeding. In case anything you hear today is traumatizing or triggers responses and you have difficulty in processing, we encourage you to breathe, forego the discussion if needed, and access the hotlines below that we'll be posting in the chat. All right, so let's begin the chat with Anju. Anju, I'm excited to be with you here. You're an amazing, amazing person. Every time we have conversations, it just goes on and on. So let's see how we can keep it to our guided timelines here. My first question to you would be is, what made you write the book? Where did the idea of the book come from?
Oh gosh, well, first of all, Monica, thank you. Thank you to you. Thank you for Raksha for hosting me, to Aparna for finding me, and appearing on my little YouTube channel when I first met her and Greg. And I was floored by everything they had to say about issues of domestic violence, abuse, and men stopping violence, and Raksha's, mission. I mean, it's incredible what you do, because so many women and men go through suffering in silence. We don't know about it.
True.
And I think it's an issue which needs to be addressed. Of course, you all do it in the best way you know how, which is really empowering victims and protecting them. In my little way, I started writing a series, and I did not know what I was getting into when I began this journey 20 years ago. So let's go back to the year 2000. I had arrived from Singapore. My kids were 5 and 1 that time. My husband started his new job, and my entire career as an international freelance journalist ended. It just, all the doors closed. And my visa, which I was on, which a lot of Asians know, an H4 visa, didn't allow me to work. So there was a situation right there for falling into depression and anxiety about what do I do with my life. So when you ask me the question of, how did this begin? The entire story, and I call it a story because that's what it is to me. It's one whole story. It began with a dream, literally a daydream. Just before I was supposed to go pick up a 5-year-old from the bus stop in New Jersey. That's where we were, in New Jersey. I snapped out of this daydream, and I was like, what just happened? And where have I seen this? Because it was like a scene from a movie. It was a cliffhanger scene, and I knew nothing. And that scene is now the end of book 2.
Good.
So
Yeah,
that's going back 20 years.
that is. Yes, yes.
A
That
lot of
just,
confusion.
yeah, a lot of what it's about what prompted you. So that kind of, yeah, if it was the daydream or was some incident that was happening, a movie you watched because you were home taking care of kids, and
And,
that's
and I
where you
hadn't even
said,
watched a movie like it.
yeah,
But what happened is and this is, answer some of the topics you and I have talked about.
yeah,
As an international freelance journalist, a lot of the times I'd interview people for either a perspective piece or an interview piece. And after the interview would be over and we'd go off record, these candidates would just talk to me. And they were from all walks of life. They were doctors, professionals, leading business people,
yeah,
business women.
yeah.
And every time they started sharing their stories, I began to see a theme that was running through in so many
Hmm.
people's lives.
Yeah. So how did you think as a South Asian writer? Did you face any challenges? Because you're talking about journalism, interviewing people. Did you face any challenges even from that time or as you're writing the book? I know we'll talk about what you faced for past 20 years trying to publish the book,
Mhm.
but as a writer at that time or as a journalist, what did you face being a South
Oh
Asian woman in the field?
my Where do we start?
Yeah, yeah.
um, I think one of the most difficult journey aspects that I could address, first of all, is most sensible authors begin with one book, one story. I began with one story, which was a series. That is not the way to do it.
So you
Um,
began with the series already in your mind, like you thought that's what it would be.
I didn't
Wow,
know what it
wow.
was. All I
Yeah.
knew was it was one story. And I put pen to paper in January of 2001. And that story, and I write pen to paper.
Hmm.
I'm very old school that way, but that's the only way the story comes out.
Yeah.
That story took 18 months to finally get to the end. 18 months of writing, being
Wow.
dedicated, disciplined. And when I hit the end, I realized, oh my God, there's another part to this. This is just the beginning.
It's not the end.
So it's not the end, no.
Yeah.
And I did not know what I was dealing with.
Hmm.
So the story that was in my head, I had to kind of put it on the back burner and say, okay, you just sit there. In the meantime, I looked at the manuscript and when I joined writing organizations, when I started working with professionals, I attended writing conferences. What I learned was I hadn't written one book. I had in fact written 2 books. But they were so intertwined, like a mesh and a mess of confusion. I had to separate them into 2 books. I had to reorient
Okay.
chapters so
Yeah.
that you're working in a chronological order.
Right.
And it's people's lives you're dealing with, even though they're fictitious. But technically, they're up here in my
There.
head all the
Yes.
time.
Yes. They're people to you. They're people to you. They're
They're
friends to
people to
you.
me,
Yeah.
yeah. And I still live with them every day. It's been 20 years.
Yeah.
I still live with them every day. And so for me, it was a question of segregating the 2 books, and then of course learning the art of rewriting. So what you see now, Duty and Desire, this is book 1 in the Winds of Fire series.
Yes.
I can proudly say, though I know it sounds really stupid, I have rewritten this book over 30 times.
Wow. 30 times.
Over
Wow.
30 times.
Wow.
Yes.
Was
And
that
that
because of all the, I know you're trying to publish it. Was it coming because there were rejections coming in and then you were like, okay, let me try to improve it? Or you started doing this and then as you were trying to get it published?
It was several factors. So one is, as a writer, when you look at your manuscript and you look at what's there, you're trying to clean it up, you're trying to get the story right.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
at the same time, you're also digging deeper for themes. The more I began to revisit the story and rewrite it, and not revise, I'm talking about rewriting, which means you start from page 1, the first word, and you rewrite the whole thing.
No.
Yeah.
No.
I have the white hairs to prove it. It's not my hair.
Oh my gosh. Yes. 30
So
times. Okay.
as I was going through that ruling process, I began to see themes like hidden gems in the story that I did not know were there. And as I began to rewrite and clean up and revise and polish, and I was working with a New York Times bestselling author and a USA Today bestselling author who were looking at my first 3 chapters and critiquing me and telling me, this is how you need to go about the process. These are the books you need to read on the craft of fiction, recommendations. attended conferences, listened to the experts, the more I began to rewrite the story, the more I began to see the themes emerge. And I did not even know that these were themes. It's like digging in the earth and you
Mm-hmm.
find these hidden gems. And then you pick the gems up and they're covered in dirt, then you have to clean those up.
You
And
speak so beautifully, Anju. I really recommend everyone reading this. The book is a gem in itself, for
oh,
sure.
thank you.
So I like that. I like
Well,
you're talking
after
about
30 years, I don't know what more to say.
no, and I think this is great because somewhere in there you and I were talking, and you did a lot of research for the book too.
Yes.
So talk about that a little bit. Who all did you talk to? There were many different people involved.
Yeah.
How did you go about it? You, considering you're not in India, you did not
Mhm,
live for a long time in India.
mhm.
You've been where? You're mostly in Hong Kong or Singapore? Where were you doing?
So I grew up in Hong Kong. I was
Yes,
there for a good 22, 23 years.
yes.
In between, every summer we would go visit India with mom, dad, the family,
Mm-hmm.
extended family. We'd visit
Mm-hmm.
Jaipur, which is where I'm from,
Nice.
and Bareilly, which is, Nani's house,
Yes.
maternal grandmother's house.
Yeah.
So that was like our yearly stint. But I lived there after my marriage, I was there for a good 6 years.
Okay.
And I was living in Bombay. And then, I began to see a different side of India and the people living there and the behavior patterns, which I didn't see when I was going on my summer trips, so to speak. But what happened was you began to form an impression and a perception, which is very different
Mm-hmm.
from anybody else. And maybe that was just me. I'm one of those people who will walk in a room and I'll completely miss the elephant in the room. It's right there in front of me and I'll miss it. But I will notice the fly and the spider on the wall in the tiniest corner, which nobody else will ever see. And so that's what began happening when I transitioned to a new location, a new place. I began to see things that were happening, especially at that time, India was booming. There was a huge, huge influx of westernization coming in, the bold and beautiful.
Which
You
year was
know,
this?
this was the 90s, the late 90s.
Late 90s. Okay.
Coke came in.
Mm-hmm.
The whole Coke, Sprite, Fanta, all those sodas came in. A
Mm-hmm.
lot of the American and British products were coming into mainstream
Yes.
India markets.
Yeah.
So basically, the playing field was leveling. But what was happening was a lot of the Western influence value systems
Mm-hmm.
were coming in, and that was conflicting hugely with the Indian traditional cultural systems.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that was, and I don't think this answered the question completely,
Well,
but
no, it definitely it gives us a perspective because I grew up in India and I was there in the 90s, and we've gone through that culture shift where it's gone from being in culture in India where you are and trying to do things the Western way. So you probably got in the middle of that,
Mhm.
and you're coming from a different country, so you're able to see that in a better way than somebody who, like me, was living there in those times. Your perspective is completely different than people who have grown up there. And that's what I was looking for. Like, how did it change coming from a country? And now you were there for 6 years, like you said. So you were able to observe more. You were able to observe relationships.
Mhm.
And
The
is it,
dynamic,
yeah,
the
is it,
dynamics, exactly. That's what
yeah,
you hit the right
yeah,
word. The
yeah,
dynamics of family, extended relationships,
yeah.
extended families. And of course, with all of that, the complications that come in,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
but also the security that comes in.
Yeah, true.
It's like two sides of, the same rope, so to speak.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons women end up staying in relationships because of the security they feel they're
Yes.
getting it. When I talk about the research, I think back to the same question is that the
Yes.
time you did your research, or did you go back for it, or did you converse with people more as you were writing the book and you were here in New Jersey?
So that was in the period of 1994 to about 2000. So this
Mm-hmm,
book was actually born in my head in the year 2000
mm-hmm.
when I had left India.
Okay.
And the research behind the book is colossal. So we're talking about the lifestyles of the rich and famous.
Mm-hmm,
So I worked with Anita Dongre and Arjun Khanna, who are
mm-hmm.
the fashion gurus of India.
Yes.
So, when Kate Middleton went to India on her visit, she chose to wear Anita
Anita
Dongre's,
Dongre. Yes.
a dress.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's the level where Anita's at. And so Anita Dongre designed Sheetal's wedding trousseau.
Mm-hmm.
from start to finish. She also decided what ensembles and clothes she should be wearing for all these extravagant venues and occasions, because I am not a lifestyle of the rich and famous person.
Yeah.
I'm your everyday Anju. I
Yeah.
don't know how rich people live, the choices they make, how they go about their daily lives. So I needed somebody who really knew what's going on in these lives. And Arjun Khanna dressed up Rakesh Dhanraj in my
Okay.
book. Who's the
Yeah,
leading
I see
hero.
that.
So he dressed up, he
Yeah.
designed his entire wedding trousseau, decided what clothes he should be wearing with his Ferrari, with the Lamborghini
Mm.
he drives,
Mm.
and all that.
Nice.
So, that actually speaks for the characters' appearance on the outside, how they carry themselves, the status, how they wear their status, and how they hold their entire family and businesses at that level.
Accountable at that level. Yeah. How did you choose that strata of um, that
That
upper cream of
strategy.
society? How did you choose, or why
Well,
did you choose that
here's the
versus?
funniest answer you'll probably ever get. I never got to choose the story. The story chose me. So when I say, that the characters came to me in a dream,
Mm-hmm.
literally it was a dream, and I spent 2 months fretting and fuming over who are the people,
Yeah.
where are they, why are they running away, who are they
Yeah.
running away from? And when I worked backwards and I began to build the story, literally pen on paper, I realized they are not ordinary people. They're upper class, middle, not even upper class middle, but Sheetal moves from upper class middle society to the cream of society,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
which is a huge step for her.
Right.
And that's just where the story set. So
So
I
there
didn't
are
have
two
a choice.
different layers of strata that you were addressing, and you were able to get the characters to that level,
Yep,
right?
those were the
Okay.
two where the story is
Yeah.
centralized on. But then I'm
Mm-hmm.
also dealing with extended family who come from
Yeah.
not so wealthy backgrounds.
Yes. 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 Yes.
So, and that is
I
the truth
love
of
the Bua in the story. It's
you
like,
like her.
yeah, I was like, wow, it's like so many, it evokes so many characters that I could think, oh, I know somebody like that. So she was funny in a way, and just how the whole family dynamics run around her. So really liked that character. It was interesting. What is one of your favorite ones?
My
One of
favorite
your,
character?
hmm
Oh gosh, I would say Rakesh Dhanraj
okay,
as
Rakesh. That's
Rakesh
a
as
weird choice, but yes, please explain.
so one of the most important things that I learned in writing was from USA Today bestselling author Haywood Smith, and she taught me that as an author, you have to love your villains. You have to, and it's really weird to say this, but you do. And I never understood that for a long time. Like, why would I like my villain? How would I love him?
Mm,
But then, as I began to, like I say, look for the gems in the hidden story, I began to realize Rakesh is not the villain in the story. He is not the villain. He is not to blame in the story. And his character is so complex, so complex,
yeah.
because now when I'm looking at other books in the series and I'm
Hmm.
exploring them, I realize he has come from a history of neglect and abuse,
Hmm.
which is why he is the way he is.
I could see that in the first book, but I think that's why I'm so interested. Please, 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 to get the hint of the second book. I know she's promised it, but it's not coming yet.
Well, I
And I'm
have the
like,
cover of the
I
second book, if
know.
that helps. Lethal Secrets.
I know. So we'll be definitely looking forward to reading that. But it's interesting that you pick Rakesh, because to me there is many characters. They were very complex characters. Even his mom, um, like
Stepmother,
yeah, the stepmother. It's like she's
Pushpa.
human at some times, and she's been part of it is the villain, the regular, mother-in-law style villain. Then she's also the mom in this story. She's a mother to two kids, and a son that she has to live, kind of prove herself to. So very complicated character. That was to me was more interesting, like how she would evolve. Would she
Right.
learn something from this? So that kind of brings to me to my next question is, this is about the whole series about women empowerment. So
Yes.
what does women empowerment mean to you? Where do you think your characters have, how have they been empowered? Where do their journey, does it end with an empowered vision somewhere?
So, when I think about empowerment, it has several layers and several meanings for me. Um, a woman from a South Asian background, it's even deeper now because you're getting into a whole layer of unlearning things. And this is what I was just talking about. I think you do a great series with Invisible Scars when you had Daya, Saki, and Raksha, four participants talking about this. One of the most impactful things that I heard was when Vikash said that with the culture, traditions, and the history of how a person is raised and the values that are ingrained in their mind, to change that requires a lot of unlearning.
Mm-hmm.
So, what I have understood is that when I look at the word empowerment, it means to begin with, in the simplest form, it is a process of becoming more stronger, more confident, taking control of your life.
Yes.
But to take control of your life, you have to be able to take control of the decisions.
Yeah.
When that's taken away from you, where does that leave you? And, that starts getting into the topic of emotional, verbal, psychological abuse,
Mm-hmm.
which is and continues to remain the hardest part of the research. Because now you're getting into something which is so invisible,
Mm-hmm.
it has and leaves no scars. You cannot go to a doctor and physically and say, I have been hurt, because where is your wound? It's invisible. So where do you go with that pain? And you do not recognize it because you don't even know it's happening to you. So when I look at self-empowerment again, I think, okay, it's taking charge of our life through our decisions, which we make every day, where you own your personal power and you gain a knowledge and understanding of yourself. For a South Asian perspective, I would say empowerment means knowing when to say no and
Um,
knowing when to say enough is enough.
from Raksha's perspective, I know you just mentioned a little bit of talking about meeting with the doctor or a therapist. So we're going to list some resources in case anyone feels the need to look at them or call Raksha for any of the hotline numbers. Because as we all know, our conversation here is not an expert solution for anything that might be going through your life personally. One more question that always bothered me when I was reading this was how how are the characters? Most of the characters in the book are they're men. Most of them are women, and
Mhm.
each one of them has a complex background attached to it. The two men that are there is Rakesh and then the dad, right? Sheetal's
People's
dad,
father, Rana.
right? And how does do you are you describing them any time in the further, like are you building those characters up? Are you telling us what's happening with them in their minds as well? um
So the
I know you
perspective.
said Raksha, I mean with Rakesh you're going to mention, but with her dad, with her dad, Sheetal's dad, have you are you go- or the parents? Those were also interesting to me. Like they completely refuse to listen to Sheetal.
Mhm.
How does that happen? How?
Um, so, first of all, I'd like to clarify also that I'm not a doctor. I'm not a psychologist or a psychiatrist. So I am in no way empowered to give advice. But what I will say is I have worked with people of those caliber for
Hmm.
the research in the book. So when I look at my secondary characters and
Hmm.
the flaws and where they're coming from,
Yeah.
Rakesh comes from a history of abuse and neglect.
Hmm.
Rana and Indu, who are Sheetal's parents, now we ask ourselves, how did they force their daughter
Yeah.
to get into the situation?
Yeah.
So let me just quickly explain what Duty and Desire is about. It's the story of Sheetal, who is a modern young Indian woman um, who is promised the perfect life, family, and husband. And she's made these promises, and to serve and to save the family honor, she sacrifices the man she loves for the man she must marry. In turn, she finds herself in a dysfunctional family full of verbal abuse, emotional, psychological betrayal, and lies and deceit. So there's a lot of manipulation. There's a
Hmm.
lot of mind
Yeah.
games.
Yeah.
There's a lot of um, diminishing of a person's personality and
Hmm.
breaking them down till they're nothing.
Hmm.
The book is written mainly in Sheetal's perspective, and so you actually go through that process. So
Right.
now when we come to the parents and we say, how do they allow this to happen? The answer is simply because coming from a South Asian background, whether you're from any South Asian diaspora,
Yeah.
our values and the value systems that are ingrained in us from the beginning come from centuries of practice handed down from one generation to another. So, as women, especially, these are unwritten, unsaid, unspoken modes and codes of conduct, which are ingrained in us from when we're born.
Yeah.
Without openly saying it, you are expected to be submissive, to be silent, to keep the peace in the family, and to hold the fort. So the parents have been doing that for some time. And though I don't get a chance to explore the secondary characters' histories, I do know all of their histories.
Yes.
And, obviously, but I don't have the space and the bandwidth in one book to get into all their stories. So Rana and Indu are simply doing what a lot of parents would do, which is because they rose from poverty to, very, very high upper class status, they need to maintain what that strata of society does to stay within that band. Because
They
the
need to
moment, yeah,
they need to go with this society. This is what their culture demands at that time. This is what
yes,
their norms demand, and they
man,
don't take the step to do something different. Yeah.
they could, but then they would fall from grace.
Yes.
And that's why I also chose to create the city of Raigun, which doesn't even exist in India. Because I needed that I needed that flexibility. I needed that openness. And it's where the characters could grow and thrive based on the story, not based on me. So I had that flexibility, but it was a lot of work. That's the other part of the research that went in creating your own city.
Yeah.
And then
What parts come from Jaipur? Something comes from Delhi. Something comes from
there's
Bombay,
a
I
little
would
bit
say.
of Delhi in there. There's a little bit of Bombay in there. There's a little bit of Jaipur. It's all a combination of different things. And I used to spend time with my at my nani's place in Bareilly. So certain
That's
fragrance,
good.
sounds, smells.
Yeah.
You don't know what's coming in until it's on the page.
Yeah. So what are readers expecting on your second book? You want to give us? I know I don't want to give a teaser out, but what to expect from the second book that's coming up?
What to expect from the second book, I would say, is to expect that the life of these characters continue. You'll still be meeting and hanging out with all of them, about anywhere from 20 to 25 characters. But as with life, for anybody, you or me, some will go, we'll lose some, and there'll be new people. But I think the most hard-hitting part of this is someone will return from Sheetal's past, which will splinter her world. That's what I can tell you.
Okay.
And the abuse will take on a more concrete form and shape, which is unfortunately the scenario of most situations. I read this book called 101 Verbal Abusers Speak Out by Patricia Evans. And in that book, she interviews 101 American women who endured emotional verbal abuse. The average length of marriages is 10 to 12 to 15 years. And when she asked them, these candidates, why did you not walk away?
Yeah.
Their answer was simply, I did not know where to go to, or I did not know how to find help, or I was too afraid to tell somebody, or it was the children's security at stake. And these are all the issues that I explore in book 2, because now you've transgressed your marriage from a new marriage to a 10-year span. There's a child involved. And then, of course, I also ask the question, what does being a good parent mean? Keeping your child with a secure future in, the lap of millions of dollars and rupees, but at the sake of security of a person's life? Or should you have gone back and made a different choice and decision and questioning what you did in a previous situation? So book 2 is definitely harder hitting. It's much more of a dynamic book even than book 1, because things are moving faster, but there's a lot more at stake because now you have a child involved.
You do. I'll read this comment from Aparna, which is very true. I think family honor and how it keeps us from speaking our truths and live our most authentic life is the biggest challenge we face in our South Asian community. So,
Yes.
Aparna, that's very true. Thank you for bringing that to attention. I think that's exactly what Anju is trying to say here is that, and somewhere we'll hopefully be able to break those norms in the next few decades, if not, and take each life. Help everybody live their authentic life, like she says. One another question was, I know when you and I were talking about it, it's going back to the process of writing, and I'm sorry I didn't bring that up earlier when you were
Mhm.
talking about how your writing is. You said something about this being an organic story.
Mhm.
What does that mean? Can you like how have you written it to be an organic? Because it's what does that mean? You have to say it.
Okay,
I
sure.
have no clue.
No, that's fine. So there's a running joke, or I would say a running myth between writers that we all talk about, whether you're a pantser or a plotter. So plotters are more of the writers who sit down and structure their story before they sit down to write. So they'll nail all the plot points, the turning points, the climax, the resolution, and they'll have a structure of their story in place. It could be as simple as a two-page outline, or it could be a chapter by chapter outline. But they plot their story and they
Right.
know their characters before they begin.
Okay.
Those are plotters. I'm a pantster, which means I write by the seat of my pants. So I really don't know what's happening until I sit down and write. And it's quite funny because sometimes my kids who are now 24 and 20 will come up to me and say, "So what are you working on?" And I'm like, "I don't know." And I really don't know because, until I sit down and write, that's when the characters come alive. So I'm a pantser. So the very first draft has to be written pen on paper. And as I write the story, that's when the characters reveal, open, and show themselves to
Nice,
me.
nice. And the
Um,
story comes around as you go back and read what you've written yesterday and things like that. Okay.
yeah, I mean, there's a little bit of revision required to go back to kind of pick up from where you last left off because as a writer, you also have a normal everyday life that you have to
Yeah,
get back to.
yeah.
So, and when you get back in your story world, which is the other life you're leading, then you have to pick up but it's the characters for me that hold the story and move the story forward. Um, that's
And
how it
every time I've talked to you, you've been very, very passionate about your book. I want readers to understand how you continued and you did not give up for 20 years. You've been trying to publish the
Mhm.
first book. I am, and you've been trying to publish it for 20 years.
20 years,
How
book
and
one and
why you
two.
did not give up? Why you did not give up?
So just to if it's funny because in we talk as writers about good rejections and bad rejections. So I would say I have over 500 rejections in 17 years of submission. Um, Three literary agents who couldn't sell the book, and the fourth agent who sold the book to a small publishing house who picked up the story as a series, not just as a one book. We'll throw it on, stick it against the wall, and see what happens. They picked it up as a series. But when I talk about the journey of why I didn't give up, there's a very, very deep core inside. Um, and it's really, I don't see myself as anything more but a vehicle. I'm sitting in this vehicle and I'm driving and writing the story. But the larger mission in what I have learned from the themes, the hidden gems of the story is the verbal, physical, emotional abuse that women of South Asian backgrounds and men don't talk about. It's a silent topic. It's a taboo topic.
Yes.
People don't reach out for help when they should. They don't know what's happening to them. So that's where, and the biggest problem is recognition of this invisible abuse. So that's where a book like Duty and Desire and the series comes in because you're writing that emotional experience with the main character. God forbid it should be happening to you, but it's a form and a way of recognizing that if you know somebody or if you yourself are in the situation and if you feel a connect with anything happening, maybe just step back and think what's happening around you, become more aware. And the first step is awareness. The second step that I have learned, and again, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a practitioner in any form,
Thank you.
but from what I've learned is awareness. And the second is recognition. After recognition, the third and biggest step is action. What are you going to do to make that different? So I could have given up this book. In my personal journey, my action could have been to given up this book. And there were many times when I just threw the papers and I'm like, I'm done. After X hundred rejections, you're really done with it.
Yeah.
But I would always have it on a little flash drive just in case. And
Somebody would speak up, somebody would help. Yeah. Yeah.
well, what I realized was, I'm not writing the story for myself. I'm writing the story to help somebody out there. Because if I can help somebody with the words and the power of words and save somebody's life, then the life that I have been given is a life that has been worth living because I've helped nurture another life with these books. It's very simple. These books are not about I, me, and myself. It's not about me, the author. It's about getting it in the right hands to help those people who can use it to move forward and out of their situation.
So, in the same context, there are different journeys in the book. A lot of them are complicated. The signs of neglect and abuse. Are they all are all the journeys ending towards hope? That's what I like to talk about
Absolutely.
mostly. Yes. Okay.
Absolutely. So for the main character, there is definitely a justified ending.
Okay.
She is, without giving the story away, she is at a much stronger point in her life.
Mm-hmm.
She has things under her control in a way that she didn't have before.
Yeah.
For the sisters-in-law, one of them, who Sheetal empowers, that character Megha is able to
Yeah.
make a decision
Yeah.
which Sheetal
I
wished she
remember.
could have. Yeah,
Yeah.
she
At that
wished she
point.
could have made
Yeah.
that decision, but now she sees that she was a coward. And had she been strong enough, she would have chosen differently and she would have been ready to take the fall, except she was a coward. But you cannot rewind what you have done and undo what you have done. So you have to learn to move forward. And that's what Sheeta learns from her own sister in law. Hey, I have to move forward.
Well, I think Megha had a support as well. Like in many forms, she had the support of Sheetal, but Sheetal felt unsupported by
Yeah.
anybody else around her. So I know we all should be looking for support or gathering support from community around us, but sometimes the community does fail us, and that's where we
Hmm.
should be okay reaching out for professional help. That's one of the things we've been taught at Raksha to always mention that professional help has been a taboo. I hope, and it doesn't keep staying as a taboo for our community going forward, and we should be able to seek that out as needed. So that's one point I know you touched somewhere in your book where Sheetal mentioned one of her other sister-in-laws reaching out for. So is that story also coming to a great ending? Is what my thing was. There are two of them, right? They both have different issues going on.
Yeah.
So
So there's one sister-in-law who should have received
yeah,
help, and
yeah,
the family, being wealthy and being able to keep everything under tabs, decide
yeah,
not.
yeah.
So that story comes to fruition because you see the long-term effects of not seeking help at the right time.
Hmm.
And where is it going to take you? And Sheetal, in her own life, absolutely advocates and makes it very clear that if, without giving the story away, that if there is to be a happy ending, the other person involved in the marriage has to be willing to take a stand and work with her,
Hmm.
as opposed to working on his own agenda. And
And she
Sheetal,
asks for that help in the
oh,
end.
she
Yeah,
demands it.
yeah,
By
she
that
demands
stage,
it.
she's able to
Yeah,
demand it. But
yeah,
it's taken her an entire book to find that courage, to be able to say, I'm going to take a stand, I'm going to
yeah.
speak up, and you better all listen to me because enough is enough.
This is my thing. Right, right.
Mhm.
Anju, towards the end, if you want to leave the audience with that one thing, let me quickly check if I've asked, because I know you and I can go on for hours, and we
Mhm.
probably will next time we meet up. But if you were to leave the audience with one thing of hope, empowerment, what would that be?
Um, so from what I've learned in my journey with the books and which I continue to learn, which again is from, the professionals I work with and the books I've read, is is a few simple sentences. And I'd like to share that with you and your
Yes.
viewers. So one is, you don't have to give your power to anyone. You don't owe your power to anybody. Your power and your life is yours to keep. to nurture, and to hold on to. It's yours. The choice is yours whether you want to give it away or whether you want to hold on to it. If you want to hold on to it, you're going to have to stand up for it. A box has four walls, but you don't have to live a trapped life because walls can be broken. When one door closes, open another and another, but don't give up. Believe in yourself because you have the will to live free. If you don't believe it, then you have to find it within.
That was beautifully said, Anju. I'm hoping I'm going to get transcribe and put it in the chat somewhere or read it in your next book. But it's amazing. Thank you. Thank you for
Thank
being
you.
on our podcast show, streamlining, whatever we've done here. And please, I recommend everyone reading the book. We'll be sending the links to the books. It's on an Amazon. It's on a special somewhere, right? There's a
It's
uh,
99 cents for now on
yes,
Amazon.
yes,
Amazon does
yeah,
its own little algorithm, but it's also
yeah.
available on Kobo,
Hmm.
Nook, Kindle, obviously that's Amazon, and other devices, it's
Good.
available.
And it went on some bestsellers list, you were telling me?
It hit the Amazon bestseller list in three
Nice.
categories. I
Nice.
honestly thought my laptop had cracked. And I was refreshing the page. Like, really? It hit the Amazon
That's good.
bestseller.
Good, good, good.
But
Amazing. Thank you for writing it. Thank you for coming on
thank you.
show. Keep doing what you're doing. And I'd love to read your book again. Thank you,
Thank
Anju.
you so much.
Thank you for what you've done. Gauri, we're on and on. So you can subscribe to our newsletter for a post-event summary where you will see all the links as well. And the video would be available to watch on Raksha's Facebook page, our YouTube channel, and a link in our Instagram. Thank you and have a good day. Have a great Sunday to you all.
Thank you, everyone.